Hey, friend, welcome into today's episode where we continue our conversation around unlocking financial freedom through a healthier relationship with money. And I am so freaking excited to be bringing you an exclusive conversation with my friend Kristen Hope, who is a financial coach who combines financial strategy, which is important, with nervous system regulation and subconscious rewiring, which is even more important, to help you build wealth, your version of wealth. And we talk about that in this episode. She loves empowering women like you to strengthen your relationship with yourself, God, which we also love, and money by listening to your intuition. She teaches women about money in a way that feels fun and exciting, which not all of us can say money equals fun and exciting. She definitely teaches you how to flip that and shift that. It's an important one. And she even has an offering, a membership right now called the Flirty Finance Club. How fun is that? She is certified in all things subconscious reprogramming. We actually went through the same certification program. This is how we know each other. And nervous system regulation. I know her unique take on wealth building and getting intimate, yes, intimate with your money will leave you more empowered to do the work that matters so you can receive the money that is meant for you. Because here's the reality. More money is readily available to you right now. The question is, are you ready for it mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually? Let's dig in and find out. Kristen, welcome to the Her Unlocked podcast.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
I am so excited to have you for a variety of reasons. And the biggest reason is just your approach to helping women actually have a healthy relationship with money. We're talking about money all month long on the podcast. And when I thought about who I wanted to bring on, because my goal is to bring on, as I bring on experts to my podcast, to bring on women who think about things differently and know how to bring in the mind and body piece to any of this work, whether it be money or other things. Because I think there's lots of people out there talking about strategy and method, which I know you absolutely bring in based on your background. And the unlock, right, is the mind and body work that most of us haven't done or don't even know about. So I'm so excited for her to hear more from you on your expertise, but also your story and how you got here. So I'd love to start there of like, who are you and what kind of brought you to this work?
Yes. So I'm Kristen, as Brittany said, and I had told her that we could probably spend an entire episode on my story. So I will do my best to try to keep it short, but might not happen. So my financial relationship started at a very young age. I have an older brother who's a year older than me, so we're very close in age. And my parents gave us an allowance when we were little. It was $1 a week in the form of quarters. And I grew up Catholic, so we had to give one quarter to church. And the way that that was presented was like everything we have is from God. And we have not only enough, we have more than enough. So to say thank you to God and to help other people who don't have enough, we're going to give one quarter to the church, and then they use that to help other people. So it was like, okay, that was that part. And then I had to put one quarter in savings because they were teaching us, it's good to save up money because one day you might need to buy something that costs a lot of money and then you've got it saved up. And then the other 2 quarters, I got to decide whatever I wanted to do with. And also starting when I was probably in about 2nd grade, they had a conversation with us about college. You're going to go to college one day. It's very expensive and you have to pay for half. So they said, we're going to pay for half of your education, but you're responsible for half of it. So I started dog sitting in 2nd grade. I started plant sitting in 3rd grade. And in 5th grade, I took a Red Cross babysitting class and started babysitting. And I had like a little whiteboard on the side of my parents' fridge with names and numbers of people I babysat for. And sometimes if I didn't have a babysitting gig on the weekend, I would call people and be like, hey, do you want to go on a date this weekend? I'm free to babysit. Like just a little entrepreneur hustling out there.
I was going to say that entrepreneurial spirit started real young.
Yes. second grade, baby. And like anytime, you know, birthdays, Christmas, I would be like, just give me money, just give me money. And I was saving it, saving it, saving it. I also, in fourth grade, asked my parents to take me to the bank to open a separate savings account to save for a trip to Hawaii. So I was obsessed with Hawaii and I felt like that needed to be a separate account. I have like my college savings, separate Hawaii savings. But then once I got to high school, I realized I should probably just prioritize my education and I can do the traveling stuff later. But where I would say that the seed got planted in my heart, not in my mind yet, wasn't aware of this at all, but where it got planted in my heart was then right before I started college, I had saved up $12,000 from all the dog sitting, babysitting, birthday money, Christmas money, working actual jobs once I had jobs, graduation party money, all that stuff. I had saved up $12,000 and I had a friend who had to take out student loans. And she was telling us about how she was so excited that she paid for her tuition, got her books and everything, and had money left over. So she went to the mall. And now this is going to age me a little bit. She got an iPod Touch, a Blackberry, and she got a bunch of clothes and she got a Coach ribbon. And the Coach ribbon was really the part where I was like, oh my gosh, she is going to pay interest on a ribbon. And I could tell like she had no idea what she had just done. She had no clue. So I think that's when it was planted in my heart of like, I got to help women not do this stuff because she didn't know better. So she couldn't do better. And I knew better, but I didn't know about what she didn't know in time to, I kind of felt like help her, save her from herself in a way. So that's where I feel like that initial seed got planted. And then fast forward to a few years after college, I wasn't making that much money, but I was still making the most money that I had ever made in my life. And I felt like something was missing. I had been so good with money for most of my life. Although I will also say when I studied abroad in Spain, I feel like a combination of the different vibe of how people in Europe approach life and then the people who I was really closely around, there started to be a little shift in my relationship with money and I got a little more careless. You know, it was kind of the YOLO era. And so things definitely shifted there. And then with being out of college and having a real job and everything, I was trying to budget, but I did not yet know what zero-based budgeting was. So my attempts to budget weren't really working. I wasn't sure why. I was kind of frustrated. And then a woman who I was teaching Sunday school with at the time told me about Dave Ramsey's Financial Peace University and was like, basically, you have to do this with me type of thing. And I thought, well, I do like money. Sure, I'll sign up for this thing. But the funny part is I had to put it on a credit card. And Dave Ramsey is completely against credit cards. His whole thing is cut up the credit cards. So it's kind of funny that I put it on a credit card. But I learned about zero-based budgeting from him and then also learned the concept of having financial priorities and doing one thing at a time because I had gotten like a little bit of debt that I had accrued. So I was kind of trying to pay that off, trying to build my savings, trying to start investing. And I felt like I wasn't making progress anywhere. And once I learned his methods, I was like, oh my gosh, this is so much better. And I also got a job where I made almost double the income. But if I didn't know what I knew about the zero-based budgeting and the priorities, I would have probably ended up spending all that extra money on who knows what. Maybe I would have gotten a Coach ribbon at that point. We don't know. So it was such a blessing to know what I was doing with money. And then from that point, just the type of person I am, if there's something that I try in my life that's helpful to me and I like it, I don't shut up about it. And I'm that annoying person telling all of their friends about stuff. So I feel like that's when I started to think, okay, it would be fun to do financial coaching and I would be helping friends for free, coworkers for free. And people would say, you should start charging for this. You really should start charging for this. When are you going to start a business, type of thing. And the subconscious rewiring part of what I do really comes in because I had a huge block. It took me 4 years to actually start the business because of a couple big limiting beliefs. First one was like, why would anyone want to hire me when they could hire Dave Ramsey? like he knows what he's doing. And obviously, we've had a little conversation before. I know you're not the biggest Dave Ramsey fan.
Yeah,
And I
we'll unpack
know,
it a little bit.
yeah, I know he rubs a lot of people the wrong way. So it's like, well, they would want to hire me because I'm not him, specifically because I'm not him. And I'm very different from him. My approach, even though there are elements that I've pulled from him, my approach is very different than his. So there are plenty of reasons why people would want to hire me. And then another big one is, well, who's going to want to pay me, or kind of that belief of no one's going to want to pay me, because if they need help with money, they're not going to have money to pay me. And that is where the God part of my approach comes in, because if I'm just focused on myself and me needing to be the one to move the mountains, or just them, kind of just the two of us making this happen, then I'm always going to be scared that I'm going to fall short. We're going to fall short. It's not going to happen. But when I remember that God is in charge and God is pulling the strings here, then it's like, well, of course, if God is calling me into this work, God is going to provide the funds to whoever needs the medicine that I have so that they can work with me. And I don't need to worry about that. And I don't need to be in that scarcity and fear that they're not going to be able to hire me.
Okay, I love that. There is so many things we're going to unpack here. One of the things I want you to talk a little bit more about, because right, like you talked a bit about the strategy and methods even as a kid. Then you talked about like discovering Dave Ramsey. What I want you to talk a little bit more about is like what were and are your beliefs around money, and how did they potentially serve you better than the woman maybe that you were experiencing in college, where I was like, that could have been me.
Yeah.
That sounds like me, right? Who most likely had a different belief system. So I'd love for her to just hear that side of your story as well.
Yeah, well, I feel like there's so much there. And one of the first things that I remember just being a kid was kind of like, anybody can get money.
That's
And
powerful.
yeah, and I don't think most people have that belief. So it was like, anybody can get money. And I also felt like I love money. And it's not that I was running around saying that to people, but I also at the same time didn't feel ashamed about it. And I think part of that was because of some of the stuff with how my parents talked about it. It was like, I love money. This is really cool. I can do something and someone will give me money. Sometimes I don't even have to do anything and someone will give me money. And then I can this was my favorite part, was learning I can put my money in a bank and they'll pay me to just not spend it. Like, people will pay me for having money.
Yeah.
That's cool. So that's another belief that most people don't have. And then, over the years, I have had limiting beliefs come up and stuff to work through. And then I've had times where I was more solid in certain beliefs. Like there was one time earlier on in my business where I started to kind of program in the belief that people love to pay me, and even like strangers on the internet love to pay me. And and that was when I very first started offering intuitive reads. And I had strangers from the internet who saw a reel of mine that resonated with them, and then they booked reads with me and told their friends. And it was like people in India and Kuwait were deciding to pay me and to work with me, and I was getting to help people all over the world. And I'm from a small town. I grew up, some people would say that it's not a small town because they're from even smaller towns, but I grew up in a place with a population of 16,000 people, less than 20,000 people, and it's a pretty small place. So my inner child, little Kristin, is like, people across the world are paying me and want to work with me, and I get to help people all over the world. That is so cool to me.
Well, and I think what is really powerful for the woman listening in to hear from you is that, like, we talk, right? We know in the subconscious world that we are imprinted with beliefs between the ages of 0 and 7. And so as you told your story and you were talking about how your parents taught you these different ways of thinking, and then when you talked about your beliefs, like, this is how my parents talked about money. So like, that is what I believed too. And that's where I feel like a lot of us don't go back to. We don't realize that like the way in which we're
Mm-hmm.
handling money, or even like, I know you're going to talk about how your body feels with money, with the nervous system side of things, but it's just like,
Mm-hmm.
you know, oh, well, because they might hear your story and be like, oh, my parents didn't have that strategy or method, or like I've tried
Mm-hmm.
Dave Ramsey and it didn't work for me.
Mm-hmm.
And the missing piece that I feel like you just shared was like your belief system was actually fairly rock solid in regards to like that. And even just sharing what's bubbled up around like you've had more money stuff around your business than like your
Yeah.
own personal expenses. And even just sharing with her about that, I just think it's like, you know, you can do any strategy or method, but if you don't have the belief system or you have a dysregulated nervous system with money
Yeah.
where you're going to avoid, that's very different. I do want you to talk a little bit about two things you mentioned just to give her a better understanding, because most likely she may not have heard about zero-based budgeting. So if she's not familiar
Mm-hmm.
with Dave Ramsey, I think it would be helpful to share that. And then you talked
Mm-hmm.
about intuitive reading. And so just sharing
Mm-hmm.
a little bit about what that means, because not everybody
Okay.
is familiar with that space too. I
Yes.
think that would be powerful.
Yes. So, zero-based budgeting is, in my opinion, the only way that you should bother to budget because what you do is you figure out exactly how much money is coming in this month. And today we are recording on October 1st. So, it's the first of the month. So, how much money is going to be coming in? And this is where also people will say, well, I don't know for sure. If, like, you now that you don't have a 9 to 5 anymore, you might know some stuff that's coming in, people who are maybe on a payment plan already committed in some way, but that doesn't mean that that's all you're going to make this month. You're not sure. Maybe you have, and not maybe, I know there are events that you're going to, and if you're getting paid per person, you're like, well, I don't know how much. And then that's where I would tell them, first of all, you do probably have an idea. So get the best idea that you can of what's going on, and then also work off of what you do know. What do you know for sure is coming in? And if you have an irregular income, like I've worked with a couple realtors also within the past year. So look at your average. What do you make on average in a month? What's the lowest month that you've had? What's the highest month that you've had? And looking at what is your total for expenses. So when you're doing a zero-based budget, traditionally, especially if you do just have a 9 to 5 with a set salary, you would put in the total amount of money that you're making, and then you would put in each of your expenses, and you would get it so that it is at zero. So you take your income, subtract your expenses, and you want it to equal zero. Now, when I say that, I don't mean you want to actually spend every single dollar that's coming in. Some of it would be allocated towards savings. Some of it would be allocated towards investments, or where you are, and that may vary based on, I do teach a version of doing the financial priorities. So Dave Ramsey calls it his 7 baby steps. I have tweaked it a little bit, but something very similar, where if you have non-mortgage debt, my recommendation is going to be that that's one of the top priorities to get that paid off, because interest rates, especially if it's on a credit card, are super high, and your monthly minimum payment is eating into your cash flow. It's eating into what you have available each month to circulate in the way that you actually want to circulate it. So if you have an irregular income, it's really good to know what is that baseline of what it does actually cost to fund your current lifestyle, so that you know this is my income goal, that or more, and preferably just a little bit more anyway, so that you're always making progress each month. But then, because the clients who have come to me with an irregular income, what's happened is they've done their taxes and they look at how much money they made in a year. They're shocked. They feel like they made more than enough money, but they didn't make any financial progress. And a lot of times they feel like they went backwards. They ended up with more debt. And they don't understand how that could happen when they made enough money. But it's because the months where they made more and had a higher month, they got all excited and signed up for that retreat that they'd been wanting to go to, or booked whatever other trip, or bought a course. They invested in something instead of looking at, well, what is my lowest month in the last year? What do I need to maybe be prepared for? What do I have going on? They don't really have that understanding of the strategy, the forecasting, planning for the future, and setting aside money to help cover. So what ends up happening is they spend all of the extra, and then when they have the months that dip below, stuff's going on a credit card because they don't have the funds available. And that's what I am on a mission to help change for women. So that's the zero-based budgeting piece.
Okay, I have a follow-up question to that before we talk
Uh-huh.
about intuitive reading. So when a woman comes to you and she's struggling with that, like those exact
Mm-hmm.
things of like not knowing where her money's coming in and going,
Mm-hmm.
and even with a consistent income, sometimes it can even feel harder because you're like, I know it's coming in, so I feel like I know what I can spend. And then lifestyle changes, like things happen, you don't adjust your lifestyle, you bring in another kid, etc.,
Mm-hmm.
whatnot. Christmas, right? We're headed into probably, would you say, the most expensive time of year where people are
Can be.
over if they're not doing this work. The hope is it's not, right? If they're doing this work.
Mm-hmm.
So my question to you is like, what beliefs have women come to you with, right? Because it's like there's something else going on, whether it be a
Mm-hmm.
belief or something with her nervous system. If you kind of take that lens to it of like, okay, yes, let's get this together. And like, what else is going under the surface? Like, what types of things do women come with you or unpack with you around their beliefs
Yeah.
or their nervous system around money?
So it's funny because it's like it's pretty simple, pretty basic. Just like there's never enough money. That is kind of the big one. Or even this is the other really, really, really common one is every time I make progress, every time I build up my savings, an expense comes and wipes it out. And then they kind of feel like, what's the point? Because they're not feeling like they're ever getting ahead. And the way that I look at it is like, no, that what just happened was already you breaking the cycle. You already broke the cycle of not having the money there and having to put it on a credit card. You had already leveled up once, and all you needed to do was keep going with this. And then you'll get to the point where you have enough that that expense doesn't wipe out your savings and you're able to build it back up quickly, and it keeps going from there. So, what I find is with those beliefs, women end up kind of, it's like they're quitting while they're ahead, but they don't even realize that they're ahead.
Yeah. Sounds like a lot of scarcity mindset.
Yes. Yeah.
Um,
And what it really is, and I do want to touch back on with you
yeah.
mentioning the whole
Yeah.
expensive time of year and if you do have a salary. So the other big thing, and this is with the people with the irregular income too, but this is one that's common whether you have an irregular income or a set income, is what I just refer to as irregular expenses. And people will say, well, I have all these unexpected expenses. And sometimes I gently ask, like, well, is it actually unexpected? Was it actually a surprise? And it's often not, because sometimes it's things like they bulk order contact lenses every 6 months. And you've been doing that, you know that it's coming. You're planning on doing it, you're just not planning for it. And so, one basic, again, strategy that I teach people is to look at what are all of those expenses, add up the total dollar amount that you spend on those irregular expenses each year, divide that number by 12, and then transfer that amount of money to your savings account every month. So then when those expenses come up, you have the money there. And obviously, depending on when you start this, it's not necessarily going to work out where you actually have the money there, because if they're front loaded to a certain part of the year or you're starting right before you have one of the bigger expenses, not all of the money is going to be there. But if you start to do that as a practice, you will get to the point where you have all the money there and you are prepared for those unexpected expenses, like Christmas. Have you ever had a year that you did not realize Christmas was going to happen?
Exactly.
You
Exactly.
know,
No.
you know.
And birthdays
Yes,
and
exactly.
anniversaries and trips.
Yep. So I'm actually working on, I have a whole list of things that I'm trying to put together for people. And one of the things on my list is a resource that lists out the things that have come up for myself or for my clients that have been irregular expenses, and having that for you to be able to look at. And either depending, because it really depends on what your situation is, if you want to do it that way where you divide it by 12 and set it aside every month, or if you are in a position where you could cash flow it if you were planning on it, because it's when it's not on your radar at all that it comes up and you've forgotten and it wasn't there. And this actually, part of what inspired me to do this that I think is very helpful for me to share is this just happened to me last month. I had actually two things that are a once a year thing, and I had forgotten that they were happening. And this, I mean, I think it just
I
can
just
happen
had
to
that happen
anybody.
too.
But I think especially for me, it's with becoming a mom. Like my brain at this time last year I feel like was barely functional. I have a 19-month-old son, so I was like at the tail end of trying to still pump, and my supply was dropping. I was super stressed out. There was a lot going on. And so I wasn't doing as good of a job, and my nervous system was very dysregulated. So
Yeah, we're
I
going
was
to
not
unpack
doing,
nervous system in a moment
mm-hmm,
for sure.
mm-hmm. So
Yep.
I was not doing as good of a job of being intimate with my money and knowing what was going on and planning for things, because the other things in my life were demanding my attention so much, and I was really overwhelmed. So as the time went on, then those things that had been very much on my radar just were not on my radar. And it was a couple things that as soon as they hit my bank account, I saw it and was like, crap. I knew about that, but I forgot about that and I didn't plan for that. So that really inspired me, because of course my first thing is, how can I make sure that I don't do this again?
Yeah.
And then how can I use this to help my clients? And I realized we need a resource that we can look at each month, go to the resource and see, okay, now it's October. What out of these expenses do I have going on in October? What from this applies to me? And make sure you are getting that in your budget.
Okay, I have two things that came forward for me. You mentioned intimacy with your money.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that is something I've heard you talk about.
Mm-hmm.
I don't hear a lot of people talk about intimacy, like they use different words, but there's something
Mm-hmm.
about like the verbiage there of intimacy with your
Mm-hmm.
money. What do you mean by that?
Yes. So, and this is where I could pull in, we'll probably get back to this later, but I have decided, as I've been talking to God about things and like, how do you want me to help people? This 5 phases of wealth building has come in. And phase 1 is awareness, where you're just becoming aware of all of these things, your patterns, your beliefs, where they came from, all of that. Phase 2 is intimacy. It's intimacy with yourself, intimacy with God, and intimacy with money. Yay, balloons. I love the AI.
If you're watching this on the video, balloons just appeared as we're talking about intimacy. So that was,
yes. We
so
love
good.
to celebrate the intimacy. So to me, what it means is actually getting in there and knowing what is going on. And if your nervous system is in a fight, flight, or freeze state, you are likely avoiding intimacy with money. And give yourself grace, because you're doing it for a reason. Your physical body is not feeling safe to do the thing. And that's why nervous system regulation is part of what I do, helping you create that safety in your body to be able to actually look at it. And then I do recommend to people for the zero-based budgeting using Dave Ramsey's app, Every Dollar, because it's currently the only app, and I just checked recently to see, has something else come up that I just haven't heard about, but it's the only app that has a completely free version that does zero-based budgeting.
Yeah.
So there is a premium version that I think is $9.99 a month or something close to that. But I recommend just doing the free version, partly so you don't have that extra expense, but partly because it forces you to have the highest level of intimacy with your money, because you have to actually log into your bank account and look at your bank account and see everything that's going on in your bank account, and then manually type in the transactions. And I know that's where I lose some people, because some people are like, I don't want to have to manually type it in. And it's like, that's okay. You're just not ready for the highest level of intimacy with money right now. And that's okay.
And then where would you take them if they were like their skin starts to prickle with that idea? Like, would you be taking them back to something? Because okay, clearly you don't feel like safe, or what do you do with clients, or will you do with clients that kind of experience that resistance?
I was going to say, well, I get really curious about the resistance, because there's some sort of resistance there. And a lot of times the resistance, this is why all of this work is also super fascinating to me, as everything is connected. Yes. So the resistance might not even have anything to do with money directly. It could be resistance because they feel like they don't have enough time, which is probably 2 things. 1, the overwhelm, dysregulated nervous system. 2, scarcity beliefs when it comes to time, feeling like there is not enough time. Because I, at least consciously, sometimes I need to get into my subconscious and get back on board with this, but I believe that we do have enough time every day to do what we actually need to do.
100%.
And it and if we are having the intimacy with ourselves, if we are clear on what we value, what's important to us, what our vision is, if we are having intimacy with God, we're connecting and we're asking God, what do you want from me today? What do you want me to do today? And we're having the intimacy with our money. That doesn't play in too much, except it kind of does, because with these things, you might decide there are things to outsource. Like maybe you need to have somebody else come in and clean your house. And you need the intimacy with your money to know that you're in a position to be able to do that, or that you're not yet, and to figure out how to get into the position where you can have someone do that. So then you are freeing up your time and you have enough time to do the things that you are actually meant to be doing.
I love that so much, because where you took us with kind of this framing and how you're thinking through how you're going, one, like you've done a lot of this with your clients even without like the full thing there. And
Yeah.
again, it goes back to like the awareness and understanding your money blocks, your money story, your money mindset, all of that first. And then the intimacy part has what it felt like was kind of, it's three prong, and it has a little bit of nervous system and strategy mixed in to support how, right? Because you need both to be intimate. Like you said, you need an app, you need like, that's super important. And in order to actually use the thing, you can't be frozen and avoiding because of your nervous system. And so if the woman listening in is who hasn't done nervous system work, or like, I'm sure she understands nervous system regulation, but not everybody's doing work around that. Can you like help
Mm-hmm.
her understand the a little bit around, like, you don't have to go into depths of like the fight, flight,
Yeah.
freeze, but just giving her an
Mm-hmm.
essence of what that is when you said that, and maybe how it relates
Yes.
to money.
Yes. So I think what's the most helpful to understand is that according to vagal theory, there are three states to your nervous system. There's the ventral vagal state, which is the state that we're in right now, where we're open, we're receptive, we're pretty relaxed, we feel safe, things are good. There is the sympathetic state, which is where you're more tense, maybe anxious, angry, even. You're getting into more of that fight or flight. You've got excess energy and you're going to maybe direct it into attacking whatever you feel like is the threat. And then you've got dorsal vagal, which is where you're burnt out, you're numb, you're shut down. And that's more of the freeze state. So the interesting thing is when you want to support your nervous system in being in the more balanced ventral vagal state most of the time, the best way to do that is to actually kind of dip your toes in and move closer towards each of those states of dysregulation. So when you are looking at the sympathetic side, that would be getting into a more active play. So working out, playing sports, like join a rec volleyball or soccer league. That is a great way to get your nervous system kind of ramped up in this safe environment. And you might have those moments of kind of aggression, but you still know that it's actually safe. You're playing a game, everything is fine and safe, and doing something like some regulated breathing, intentional conscious breath to bring you back into balance afterwards can be great there. And then with the dorsal vagal side, doing something like meditation, breath work, intentionally slowing yourself down and realizing that you can slow down without completely freezing and shutting down. And then, get a little active after that to come back into balance. So some people are just more balanced naturally, but most people either are that kind of higher energy by default. And like I can think of, especially women I know right away who are go, go, go. They keep themselves so busy. They do not slow down. They're so uncomfortable slowing down. And they really need to get into that realm more. And that is also how I used to be. And then I know other people who really struggle to get active and get moving, and they're closer to that shutdown state. So having that understanding that those are two states that you could get in within the realm of dysregulation that you can kind of play with in a safe way to stay regulated.
I love that. And then how does that show up with the money piece? Depending on where she is, like if she's clearly, we know where she's at. If she's balanced, she's most likely she's ready for the strategy. She's going to be your client. Like, I'm ready to implement. There's not a lot of blocks there. She potentially just needs that strategy and method piece, but then you've probably had clients on both, kind of in both areas. So how do they show up, or how do they experience money?
Well, a lot of times they are in those avoidant states because they're overwhelmed. They've got too much going on. They're either in that more high energy, doing literally everything but checking their finances, or they're in more of that shutdown freeze, which they're still not checking their finances. So it's getting them to start to do some exercises to get back into balance, to then be ready to take a look at their finances. So it's interesting because I feel like for the most part, people do, in the past, they at least had to before I started, and I'm very new into starting to talk about the nervous system regulation side of it. But before that, they essentially kind of had to get themselves to the point where they could look at it. Otherwise, they wouldn't even be booking a session with me.
Yeah. And now you're like, hey, I actually have all the pieces to truthfully, right? Because it's mind, body, and the method and strategy. And you're
Yep.
now equipped to help with all aspects of
Yep.
that. And I love, again, like the kind of journey you take her on. Because what I would say, like for me, as I speak to kind of where I'm at and where my journey has, like, one of the beliefs I have, which you didn't mention because it was more from a scarcity mindset, the belief that I have carried around and that I've been working on and that I'm really aware of is that I am bad with money in, money out. I'm the girl who would have spent and I've done that. When I studied abroad, I took out a loan and I spent some of it on a purse. So when you were talking about that, I am her. I am
Yeah.
her. And so like for me, I've been in this, especially because we have this, gone through the subconscious work, and like some of it's tied back to worthiness. And I'm not even like, I have to earn my worth in order to make a certain amount. I have to be worthy of it, type of thing. And I feel like I'm really aware, and I feel like what I'm moving into is kind of the intimacy thing of like really being able to be intimate. And what I have realized, because I've been doing some nervous system stuff, so it makes a lot of sense, that's unrelated to money, but in general, when you're regulated or know how to get regulated, you can also really start to become aware of what makes you dysregulated. And my bank account makes me dysregulated. And so it's like really leaning into the three things you were talking about. And starting to be intimate. So I love that phrase because that feels really different than just like knowing or being aware. Like that's the first
Yeah.
step. But like intimacy is like, because you talk about, is your theory to like look at your money or spend time with your money every day? Or like, what does that normally look like?
It doesn't have to be every day. And I think every day can lean into then more of almost even like an anxious attachment with your money. You know, we don't want that either.
Yeah.
So, what I personally really love to do is have weekly check ins with my money. And Friday is just a day that I naturally kind of like to do that, which, if you're into astrology, that's Venus Day. And it just kind of makes sense. But Saturday is also a good day for that. Saturn Day is Saturday, and Saturn is discipline and those types of things. So honestly, it's whatever day works for you that you can fit it into your schedule to look at, but weekly checking in. So before each month starts, or for sure on the first of the month, getting your budget set, understanding how much is coming in this month, where you want that money to go, which this is another thing to mention. So with the 5 phases of wealth building, we talked about awareness, we've talked about intimacy. The next step is freedom. That's the next phase. And a lot of people, when you were talking about your belief that I'm bad with money, that's definitely a common one too. But another thing that has prevented people from being able to build wealth is this belief that having a budget is restrictive. And
1,000%.
that is my favorite myth to bust, because the budget is not restricting you. Your income is restricting you. But you can also increase your income by rewiring your subconscious mind. It's really your own beliefs that are restricting you, technically, at the end of the day. And having a plan, first of all, if you hire me, I'm not telling you what you can spend your money on and how much you can spend
Yeah.
at Starbucks or on a purse or whatever. I'm being there with you while you decide what you want to do. And I'm a sounding board and we can talk it out, but ultimately you are deciding what you want to do with your money. And I just had a client who started with me a couple weeks ago who had then reached out to me and said that she felt like she finally could spend money at restaurants. And she really did find freedom within having that budget and the awareness of what was going on with her finances. So having a budget and having that plan actually creates this level of freedom. And when you have that, and to me too, it's not even just, okay, I've decided that I'm spending this much, so now I can't do this. This is another mindset thing that I don't think I was even really aware I did before automatically, but I would just kind of ask myself, would I rather have this purse or would I rather have this money? And for me, it was almost always, I would rather have the money, and I would rather keep building my savings, building my investments, whatever it is. So it's starting to ask yourself, what do I want more? And realizing that it is just a choice and you get to choose. And like the big thing that I'm going to be talking about, you were mentioning a shift in your content to me before this, and I am going to be having a shift in my content as well. And one of the big things is like becoming wealthy ultimately is just a decision, and it's a commitment.
Amen.
You have to decide that you want it and then commit to it and then align your actions with that commitment. But nobody said you have to do this. You're not a bad person if you decide, I don't care about being wealthy. You're also not a bad person if you decide, I care about being wealthy. You can be a good person and decide you don't want to be wealthy. You can be a good person and decide you do want to be wealthy. It's just, what do you want? And then if you want it, you have to commit to it and take steps in that direction. So it really helps you to understand what you want to do when you've decided, okay, I do want to be wealthy. You understand the strategy piece. You're supporting your nervous system so you can show up with it. Which another thing with that is if you're feeling overwhelmed, your bank account stresses you out, you don't like looking at it, you feel like there are always transactions going on. Well, that's a really good time to, again, values. I feel like I can't hammer it home enough, especially because I had a mentor a few years ago who I kind of put on a pedestal because she was very good at her craft, and she also positioned things to make it look like her business was in a position that it actually wasn't in yet. So I thought, okay, she has these answers for me. I was kind of giving my power away to her, and she was telling me to do these things that didn't align with my values, with what I actually cared about. But the way that she presented it to me made it sound like they did. And even though there was this little red flag coming from my intuition, I listened to her anyway, which was a huge lesson for me. So that is why I will hammer it home forever that you need to be clear on what your values are, not what somebody else wants for you, not what your mentor cares about, not what your best friend cares about. What do you actually value and care about, so that you can make those choices and you can decide, do I want to have a little bit bigger of a clothing budget while I'm building my wealth, or would I rather wait until I get to a certain point and then expand it out? And again, it's all a choice and it's all neutral. It's just a choice that you get to make, but you do have to make the choices for yourself, and you're making them whether you're sitting down and being intentional about them or not. So This is just giving you your power back by helping you be intentional about it. And the freedom, I mean, all these phases end up kind of happening simultaneously up until the last one. So the next phase, that it's kind of like freedom unlocks, and you almost instantly also start to move into stability. You're creating this internal stability that will then reflect externally by you creating a financial situation where you are debt free, where you do have savings built up, and you have maybe 3 to 6 months worth of your expenses in a savings account. You feel more stable internally, and as a reflection, your financial situation becomes more stable. And then, of course, they do play off of each other, because the more that you have that external stability, it can help with the internal. But the thing that I want people to know is having the bank account and having the money there doesn't automatically make you feel stable on the inside.
Hell no. That's
so
where,
many.
yeah, that I think I get really fired up about, because it's
Mhm.
like an old belief I had, is that like it's like stability and freedom and success comes from a number in your bank account.
It doesn't.
Exactly.
And if you're not addressing the internal, it doesn't matter how much money you have in your bank account, you will still feel like it could get taken away at any time, and you will still feel this fear, which is why intimacy is such an important phase, and that intimacy with yourself, self-trust, intimacy with God, trusting God that God is going to provide for you and that you are resourceful and you will figure it out. And the intimacy with money and trusting money and being able to look back and know that, yeah, money has also always shown up for me. It has actually always been there. I have actually always been okay. And being able to be really regulated in that so that as your accounts build, you actually are building that internal stability and you're not on this constant quest for more, because nothing is ever going to be enough.
Yeah, because we actually just had a sermon on money. I'm like, oh God, okay. Because he knew. He was like, I want you to talk about this. And it's a sermon on money. And then my pastor was talking about just like the wealthiest people, like using examples. And when they were asked, do you feel happy, or how much more would make you feel happy? Or fulfilled or something like that. It's like they always felt like they needed 10% more in their bank account.
Interesting.
No matter what the amount was.
Yeah.
And it was from, like you were saying, it was never enough. And they, like a lot of these people who are, and when I think of wealth, right, it doesn't always have to be that number in a bank account, right? Like everybody's definition of wealth is going to be different. But to your point, like you have to define that, you have to decide on that, you have to then do the work for that. But that, I just thought that was interesting, where it's like, yeah.
And I love that you brought up that definition of wealth, because that's a big thing with me too, is when I'm talking about helping women build wealth, I'm not just talking about helping you build your bank account.
Yeah, I know.
If you're stacking money and you're unhealthy, then you're not wealthy, in my opinion.
And that's why I was so excited to bring you on the podcast, because it is this like strategy and method matters, and like having a process and doing that. And you could do all of that and still have an unhealthy relationship because you never worked on your belief systems, your nervous system, like everything else that you help women do. And also you take it from, the lens of what God does for you. And so I want you to unpack that a little bit too, of like, that's something you've built into the intimacy portion. And I know you weave through a lot of what you do. And so what does it look like to be intimate with God around money?
Well, this is such I guess it feels like kind of a loaded question, because I believe that everyone should have a very personal relationship with God, and I don't think that I should dictate what that looks like for anybody else. And I feel like my relationship with God is really, really unconventional. And it's like, I don't fit, there are kind of these groups that we see out in the world, and it's like, you can be a Christian, or you can be Jewish, you can be Muslim, you can be just spiritual, you can whatever. And I'm like, well, I'm over here, and I was raised Catholic, but Catholicism didn't really resonate with me, other than I did love praying to St. Anthony when I lost things, and he would always come through and find things for me, help me find them, I guess I should say. And so that, I think, is also that was like my gateway to spirituality when I really think about it, because it was like, there's this dude who is connected to God. He's like homies with God, St. Anthony. People decided he was important. And for any of you who are not Catholic and are like, what is she talking about? He's the patron saint of lost articles. So my Catholic Italian mom's side of the family would, anytime we lost something from a very young age, like toddler lost their blanket, we're praying to St. Anthony to find blankie so we can go to bed, type of thing. So I grew up very much, we would pray to St. Anthony, which was just this little St. Anthony, please come around. Whatever item it was lost and must be found. Amen. And then we'd go look for the thing, and then we'd find it, and we'd be like, thanks, St. Anthony. And I felt like I had these like invisible friends in the world, who were helping me out. And I have some crazy St. Anthony stories of times that something was lost and how it was found. And I would also help other people. Like, there was one time I remember in college, I was drunk, and it was freshman year, and this kid couldn't get into the dorms because you needed your student ID, and he had lost it. And I drunkenly was like, I can help you. And I prayed to St. Anthony, and I was like, go retrace your steps and you'll find your ID. And then he found me later, and he was like, he had put me on this pedestal and was like teach me everything you know about God, because he retraced his steps and he said he found his ID face up, perfectly lined up with a crack on the sidewalk. And he kind of felt like there's no way it could have just fallen like that. And it's like,
Yeah.
who knows? Maybe it did. Maybe St. Anthony moved it. But either way, I kind of felt like I'm just a girl. Like, I'm just a girl with a relationship with God and St. Anthony. And, I kind of was like, I don't know, just talk to God. I didn't really know what to do with that in that situation. But that's been a thing. And, friends, like college roommates will occasionally text me and say, like, I lost my debit card. Will you pray to St. Anthony for me? And I'm always like, you guys, you can like Google the prayer and Google it and say the prayer and you can find it. Like, you don't need me. And that's part of the thing too, is like, you don't need me to have a relationship with God. You don't need your pastor to have a relationship with God either. And after college, I started going to a Presbyterian church. And I feel like that was where my relationship with and understanding of Jesus changed tremendously. They did a really good job. I had a very young pastor. He was only a few years older than me, and he did a really good job of making the messages entertaining and relevant and very applicable to life, and also giving the historical context. It was the first time in my life that I had been to church and somebody made me feel like hungry to know more.
Yeah.
And, hear more, understand more. And I started bringing a notebook to church and like taking notes on stuff because it was just so good and so interesting. And he would say, this is the word. They actually use the Greek word here or the Hebrew word here. And this is what this means. And there are these other words that mean similar things, but there's this nuance here. And I thought it was so fascinating and loved that. And then they would also bring in different speakers sometimes. And I read the book Jesus Feminist and learned about how Jesus was so pro-woman. And, there's a book that's called Outdoing Jesus that's all about how Jesus literally tells us, you are supposed to go and outdo the work that I did. And I think so many times in the church, people are putting Jesus on this pedestal, and then it's like, we're just a bunch of lowly sinners. And, yeah, Jesus died to forgive you of your sins, but like, you're still kind of never going to be good enough was the vibe that I got. And I don't like that. And it was nice to find things like this where it's like, no, you literally can do more miracles than Jesus did. And Jesus himself is asking you to. And I feel like that is such a game changer to have those types of exposures. And then with the story of my business also, I just realized I forgot to mention, I think, the part where I actually got to the point of starting the business, which came from just about this exact time of year, 4 years ago. I prayed one day and was like, okay, God, I feel like we have a pretty good relationship. I talk to you a lot. Like, I'm a bit of a yapper and I talk to you a lot, but I feel like what's missing is me being able to hear you. And I know that part of it is that I need to slow down and shut up and listen. But also, I have a hard time doing that because I don't know what you sound like. I don't know what's you versus just what's my own thoughts. And it was like, can you help me to know what's you? And then, interestingly enough, just a few days later, a friend introduced me to tarot, of all things. And it was in the form of these tarot YouTube videos where she's doing readings based on your horoscope. And a lot of it was like love life and whatever. And I had some drama going on in my love life at the time. So I was very into that and thought that was fun. But I thought, okay, I want to get a tarot deck, and it's actually sitting right here, the very deck, this little everyday tarot. So it's this tiny deck, and there were a couple cards that tell you about different spreads that you can do. And there was one that was just like a 1-card pull, and you can ask, what do I need to know right now? And then you can ask, what's in alignment with my higher self? So every day I just started to pray, and I was like, okay, God, like, use these cards to tell me, because this feels tangible. This feels like something that I'm not going to think that I'm just making it up, because anytime it's just a thought in my head, it feels like I'm just making it up. And so I started doing that every day, and I would take to heart what was in the cards, which sometimes it would be talking about like anxiety and these thoughts that are just consuming you and keeping you stuck in cycles. And everything that I was pulling was obviously very resonant for me. It made sense to me. It felt like, wow, yeah, this is what's going on. I was also pulling cards that were talking about how I am meant to leave a legacy and how I'm here for something more. And that also felt like yeah, that's something God would be saying to me. This sounds like God. This feels like God to me. And I know most Christians are like, tarot's from the devil. It's bad. And there's even actually a devil card in the tarot deck, which probably doesn't help. But that card is actually about the subconscious mind, interestingly enough, and about, becoming aware of those shadows that are going on within you. So tarot got me, and this is the crazy part, 2 weeks of praying and pulling tarot cards got me to the point of being like, okay, God, I'm starting my business. And I launched my business on October 16th. I think it was either the 14th or the 16th, and I need to probably look it up, but 2020, that was when I officially started the business. So my relationship with God is like, talk to God a bunch. I feel like I communicate with God a lot through nature. I'll see different animals, and it is messages that as you get into it, you start to understand and know, okay, this is what God is saying to me. And I will get those. They feel like little winks from God or nudges, or just God letting me know, yep, I'm here with you when I see certain animals. And then, sometimes I will pull a tarot card or oracle card. Sometimes another thing I like to do is to like ask God about something and then just open the Bible and see which page. So sometimes I feel like people either are going to be a Christian and you got to believe all of this stuff and you got to read the Bible and everything in the Bible is the word of God and is the truth and that's the way it is. Or you can do this stuff, but you can't do both. And I have decided not to subscribe to that line of thinking. And I have decided that my relationship with God gets to be what it is.
I love that. So when you go back to thinking about, right, like what you're taking the woman through, like you're asking her to have intimacy with God, and what I'm hearing you say is like that's going to look different for everyone.
Correct.
How do you even guide her to like figuring that out?
Mm-hmm.
And how is that related to money?
Well, it starts with like what feels right to you? What feels resonant to you? Do you feel like you're being called to go buy a tarot deck and start to talk to God that way? Or when I say that, are you like, no? Do you feel like you're being called to start to go to church? Because, so for example, you said you just went and there was a sermon about money. And several years ago, I went to visit a friend in Oklahoma and we went to his church and it was a sermon about tithing. And this was my pre-Dave Ramsey days. So it was a sermon about tithing. And I was kind of like, oh, seriously, I'm here on the tithing service. Cause usually like once a year churches will do the tithing.
Right into that. Yeah.
Yep. Do the tithing service. And then the next week I was home and I went to my home church and it was their tithing service. And I was like, okay, God, I hear you. I'm going to do this. And it was terrifying. And in case anybody here doesn't know what tithing is, it's giving 10% of your income usually to your local church. But what I encourage women to do is, again, like talk to God about it and see, because it's very possible that your local church is doing fine financially and God could work a miracle through your resources somewhere else, through some other organization. So talk to God, see what's right. And also maybe God's not even calling you to do 10% right now. Maybe God's calling you to do 5% or even 1%. Or maybe, depending on what your exact situation is, maybe God's calling you to do more. You never know till you talk to God and figure it out. But I definitely was feeling called in that moment, getting the 2 weeks back-to-back tithing message of God wants me to do this. And it was from this stepping out in faith, trusting that it was going to work out. Because at that time, again, this was before I had the zero-based budgeting. This was when my finances were a little bit of a hot mess. I felt like, I don't know if I can even afford to do this or how this is going to work, but I just felt like I was supposed to. And it was an exercise in trusting God more than it was an exercise in anything else. So I started tithing, and this was in November of, I think, like 2014. And the next month, Christmas, my parents gave me like $800 for Christmas, which is obscene and not normal. And I don't remember what the reason was. There was something that had happened for them that they had extra cash and they felt like they wanted to be generous and pass it on to us. And that felt like again, kind of a wink from God of like, told you.
Yeah.
Told you you'd be fine. Told you could trust me. And my financial situation only continued to improve and get better from there. And it was a little over a year after that I started the Financial Peace University.
Yeah. I think it like what I love hearing is like it's another decision. And
Mm-hmm.
I think, yes, maybe God isn't calling you to do 10%. And I would also really challenge the why and making sure that He has made it really clear of why it's not 10%, why it isn't
Mm-hmm.
even for some more.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times it is deciphering what God is telling us and like figuring out, how do I hear God? How do I feel God? Because sometimes we like avoid even going to God with some of these things, especially money, when like we
Oh,
want to
yeah.
white knuckle it. And what happens, which I feel like people don't believe until they experience what you were just talking about, is
Mm-hmm.
like the more you give, the more you receive. And it goes back to
Mm-hmm.
kind of, even though that was sound like a point of tension for you a little bit, it even goes back to that belief I think you said you had in childhood, which like is money's always available, or it's like always coming
Mm-hmm.
in, or I can't remember how you worded that. But I
Mm-hmm.
feel like that's also a belief to have when tithing and when like being called to do that. It's like you'll get it back in tenfold. Like
Right. But
might
I
not be
also,
tomorrow, but you
yes,
know.
but I also make sure that I'm clear to people about like this has to be coming from the right place in your heart. And if you're starting to tithe so that you'll get more money,
Yes.
don't do it. You're
Yes.
not ready. Your heart's
Or
not
like
in
a
the right
should
place.
or I have to. One of
Yeah.
like,
Obligation, not it either.
because it's not to your point. I love that, because that was something our pastor was talking about, and he was being honest. Like he would go to church at the beginning, and it's when they used to. Some churches still do, but pass the plate around.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yep.
he was like, I literally would look to the side and like look down and see if like people were putting stuff in or not that day, and like
Oh my
make a
gosh.
decision. And our pastor has like a history of like not being in the church kind of thing. And I was like,
Yeah.
man, that is so true. And he's like, if you're making a decision from that place, which is kind of what you're talking about, where you feel
Mm-hmm.
obligated or I have to, or this is the only way I'll get money back, like God knows.
Mm-hmm.
God knows.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, I
And what
love
I would
that.
say is like if you're doing it to try to get a result of either, like I said, hoping to get more money or hoping to kind of like save yourself, prevent yourself from getting in trouble, that's not the right place. But if you're doing it from this place of like, I'm curious to see who I become from having this level of trust in God, that's when you know you're on the right track with it.
I love that. Okay, I have two things to wrap us up.
Mm-hmm.
One, woman listening in is like, amazing, love this episode, and is like, where do I even start?
Mm-hmm.
Like, how can she start this work? And then also, how can she potentially work with you if that's something she feels called? So, kind of answering those two questions.
Great questions. So I would say with the where to start, I'm kind of always going to say with a zero-based budget. And if you are in resistance to that, then start with getting curious about that resistance of, okay, why am I hesitant to do this? Which I think it's also really important. And I'm kind of shocked this hasn't come up in our conversation yet. Really important to remember that your subconscious mind's main job is to keep you safe. And to your subconscious mind, safe is same. Whatever is going on right now, we know what's going on. We know how to navigate it. This is what we're doing. No matter how uncomfortable it is, no matter how much you actually hate it, it's what feels the safest to you because it's what you're used to. So your subconscious mind will resist doing something different because it labels it as dangerous, even if it's actually better for you. So that is important to know with your resistance is your subconscious mind is going to probably resist it and your nervous system is probably going to resist it because it's different and that unknown is labeled as dangerous and you could be afraid of it and it's actually the best thing for you. So know that. Did you want to
I
say
was going to say,
something?
how did she address that, right? Because there is going to be women, and I think of myself too, like
Mm-hmm.
it's less potentially about the strategy or the method. And like you said, like you're feeling that resistance because of all these other things. So what if she's like in this moment hearing you say I'd start with zero-based budget and she's like, whoa.
Mhm.
She
Yeah.
physically feels her like, then what does she do it like, right? Like,
What does
yes,
she do
okay,
with
I
it?
hear
Mhm.
you. I
Mhm.
know that it's out of fear. And then it's like, what does she do with that?
Yeah. So this is where sometimes I feel like it's tricky because, of course, a session with somebody is going to be the best thing to be able to really unpack it,
Yeah.
reprogram it. But I would say second best thing is like journaling
Yes.
and getting into, okay, why do I, and sometimes for me, writing down the question can then, and just starting to write after that, you'll get to the point where it's coming out. Another thing, depending on what type of person you are and how you process, can be, you might feel a little silly doing it, but I do this for myself sometimes because it really helps, is recording the question on the voice notes app on my phone and then playing the question and then responding verbally. So kind of figure out, you can try both things, yeah, and see what works for you. But that sometimes I almost have to do the recording one for myself so that it feels external. I'm a manifesting generator in human design, so my strategy is to respond. So I kind of need an external thing to respond to, and if there's not another human that I can tap in that situation to help me, then that's when I go to my voice recordings and I kind of turn myself into an external person to be able to respond to. So that can be really helpful. But yeah, asking yourself, okay, why am I feeling this? And if you're not getting anything there, try asking yourself, what am I afraid is going to happen when I do this?
I love that because I love that you're giving her like, okay, yeah, when I say zero-based budget, if there's no resistance there, like go for it. That's where I would start. And then if there is
Mm-hmm.
resistance, okay, take a step back and here's some things twofold, right? Doing a session or reaching out to you, or like also I would probably say
Yeah.
journal, right?
Yeah.
And get curious and asking yourself that those questions. And I think all of that is so powerful to leave her with. So now how can she stay connected with you, potentially work with you? What do you got going on in your world
Yes.
right now?
Yes, great question. So I am on Instagram and my handle is, it's Kristen Hope, ITSKRISTINHOPE. So that's where you can find me on Instagram. And then I have, this is new, that I've put out my Flirty Finance Club, because when
So
something
fun.
feels fun, you're so much more likely to do it. And so I feel like God keeps expanding. I knew when it came through that it was going to kind of start small and get bigger. I didn't realize how fast it was going to shift and start to get bigger. So I recorded some videos and got them in the portal. And then it also has a group Telegram. So you can directly ask me questions in the Telegram group that I will answer. And if there is something where you want to get into the specifics and you don't necessarily want the other people in there to know your exact financial details, you can send me a private message and then I will respond in the group so that everybody gets to hear the answer and benefit from the answer, because it will be helping other people for them to hear the answer, but they won't know that it's you and your personal financial details that I'm discussing. And so that portal is already due. It's like, I'm trying to think if it's even like 2 weeks old at this point or something. And it's like, it's already due for a makeover, because new, even just like the phases of wealth building was something, the clarity and conciseness around it was something that came in, that now I'm being guided to redo everything and have it in the phases and be that way, instead of just a more linear step by step, turning it into what feels like more of an experience. So upgrades will be coming in there, but the Flirty Finance Club is $35 a month, but you get a week free. So you can join for free, be in it for a week, see how it feels, see if you vibe with it, ask a question or a few questions. And if you don't feel like it's right for you, then you just cancel it before you ever get charged. And if you do feel like it's for you, then you stay however long you need to. It's there to support you. And really kind of my idea of it was for it to be there to support you through, and I think I've only actually mentioned the first 4 phases, but the 5th phase is expansion. And that's when you are really, investing. And there is a video in there about investing, so you get that help. But then once you're at that phase, you're kind of also always cycling back So those first 4 phases, you get awareness, you jump right into intimacy, creates freedom, creates stability, and then you're always having to make sure you're staying in the awareness and staying in the intimacy so that you can remain in the freedom, remain in the stability, and keep going with the expansion when you're at that point. And part of the freedom that I don't think I even talked about before is, especially when you're getting clear on your values with the awareness and intimacy pieces, it's freedom from consumerism and feeling like you always need to buy the next thing and the next thing. And that could be in the form of clothes, shoes, the material things, but it could also be what I've gotten more caught up in the recent years is the consuming of content from other coaches and other creators and feeling like, okay, my message isn't good enough. My marketing's not good enough. I need to fix, feeling like what you have to offer is not good enough, which is such a lie. And my business could be so much further on already if I had done, especially like the nervous system regulation piece earlier, and just come from this place of, okay, what do I have right now that is of value and how can I share it? That's really, especially if you are listening to this and you're a business owner, that's the question you should be asking yourself. What do I have right now that is of value and how can I be sharing it? Because you have something that is of value. It is good enough already. It will help people already. And you can start to share it now and allow yourself to receive in the form of money in exchange for sharing it. And then allow that to support you into the next level, the next level, the next level. Because another thing is, I really feel like we are constantly evolving. If you let yourself, you will definitely be constantly evolving. It's always going to change. And for a while, I would get caught up in that perfectionism too of feeling like with this Flirty Finance Club, I feel like there's a tendency to want to wait until something like the 5 phases comes in. So then it can be this more perfect, polished thing that I'm putting out into the world. But the call from God is do it now, and then you can improve upon it. And I took the action, stepped out in faith, and then the next iteration was delivered to me because I took the action that I was supposed to take. And now I get to implement that. And then who knows what's going to happen after that? We'll find out.
Yeah. Well, you don't know till you go. I think like
Exactly.
that's the thing that I like when you're saying that from God, and you don't know till you go. And I think that that's related to like money and career and business. It's like not everything is going to be, most things are going to be messy and they're not going to be at all what we planned or expected. And yet if we're just paralyzed, which again takes me back to money, if you're just paralyzed from looking at your money, doing like, right, there's lots of people who are really frugal with their money or spending all their money or whatnot. Like, you don't know what's possible till you like, this is what I was thinking about. You don't know what's possible till you get intimate with your money, with God, with yourself to unlock all of this. So I am so grateful that you came, shared your story, shared the incredible work that you do with women, just the evolution of how you're serving her, and just this framing that God has planted on your heart in a way that I think is just going to change the game for women and wealth. I'm so excited. I'm so excited for the woman listening in. I have no doubt that she has been not just inspired to do something with her money, but actually take action, which I know we both believe in and you were just talking about. And so I can't wait for her to connect with you, learn more as your page evolves on Instagram, just like mine. I know it's going to be so juicy and full of goodness for the woman listening in. Yes. I heard you so much.
Thank you. I also just realized I didn't even say I could have shared my email address and my website too.
I'll drop,
show notes, throw it in there. But it's Kristen Hope, and the website is it's kristinhope.co.
We'll drop all of that, even a link to the Flirty Finance Club, all of that goodness. If there's anything else that you think of after the show, we'll drop it in the show notes.
Perfect. Yeah, I have some one-on-one options too, so we can get that in there.
Amazing. All right. Thanks, friends.
Thank you, Brittany. Talk to you later.